Now we're good? All right. We call to order the August 21st meeting of the Kalamazoo City Planning Commission. Welcome, everyone, for your attendance tonight. First, may we have the roll call?
Bartman?
Here.
Koss?
Here.
Espinosa? Greenman Wright?
Here.
Hughes Nielsen? Milliken?
Here.
Pitts?
Here.
Bias? Wissner?
Here.
Thank you. We have a formal agenda before us. Are there any changes or additions?
There are none.
All right. May we have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Greenman Wright, seconded by Commissioner Pitts. All those in favor respond yes.
Yes.
Any in opposition? All right. Agenda is approved. Commissioners, you have before you the minutes of the August 2nd regular meeting. Any additions, corrections, comments? May we have a motion to adopt the minutes as... Okay. Second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wissner, second by Commissioner Koss. All those in favor respond by yes.
Aye.
Any in opposition? All right. Are there any additional communications or announcements?
There are none.
Okay. So moving into our public hearings. For those in the audience, we'll observe several opportunities for public comment, both here in the public hearings as well as in items G and I later in the agenda. During the public hearing, there will be a staff presentation, and then we'll invite the applicant to present their 10-minute request. Following that, the public is invited to step up to the podium and state your name, your address, and provide your comments within a 4-minute time limit. Following the comments, we ask that you please sign your name and your address at the podium over here to the left. We ask that all audience members either silence your cell phone or turn them off during the duration of the meeting. And we'll now open the public hearing and have the staff report, please.
Can you hear me? Thank you. So case before you, PC 2018.13, a request for a rezoning of a portion of the property at 333 East Elcott Street. What you have before you is the kind of context map for this project. This is a city-owned property that's in the brownfield. The applicant will have a portion of it, approximately 2.6 acres, of which they are requesting a rezoning from M1, which is the manufacturing district, to RM24, which is a medium density multifamily district. This is kind of a focused in on the portion of the greater property that the request is on this evening. It is directly off of Belford, even though the address is off of Elcott. The larger parcel is Elcott. The parcel in question is the area that's being rezoned is in the eastern corner on Belford. Existing zoning for this parcel is M1. The area shaded is RM24. You'll see that there are a variety of zoning districts in the area, including yellow, which is RS5, and both RM15, another multifamily district, and RD19, which is a duplex district, in addition to some commercial along Portage and some manufacturing throughout the area as well. The future land use plan denotes this area as both R2, so medium density residential, and neighborhood edge. If you remember from the master plan, neighborhood edge is a category that allows a mix of uses, including medium density residential and commercial uses. Here are some views of the property. The residential that are to the east and south, the Family Health Center to the south, and the County Health Facility to the west. In considering the request tonight, there's a couple things that I wanted to go over. This is a rezoning case, and so a couple of things that we look for, we ask the commissioners to look for, are first, how does it relate to the 2025 master plan? As I mentioned a minute ago, looking at the map, RM24 being a medium-density residential district aligns with the neighborhood edge and R2 classifications. This rezoning and the project involved with it helps tick some boxes with some of our strategic vision goals, specifically shared prosperity, environmental responsibility, and economic vitality. In the zoning, in our city zoning ordinance, there are 5 factors that our commissioners are asked to consider when looking at a rezoning, and I just want to go over those real quick. 1, consistency with the master plan. I think we've already talked about that. 2, is there a change in conditions with the property that makes the zoning appropriate? And I think that staff would say the former manufacturing site has been torn down, been vacant for many years, so it definitely has been the subject of a significant amount of change from its previous uses. Does the project address, or the rezoning address a demonstrated community need? RM24 is a housing district that allows multiple family. We know from housing studies that the city of Kalamazoo is in need of additional housing, particularly affordable housing. So I would say that it addresses a demonstrated need within the community. Is the proposed district compatible with surrounding uses? If we go back to look at our zoning map, existing zoning map I showed you a few moments ago, this area is a mix of zoning classifications that include both single-family districts as well as multifamily districts, a mix of commercial and industrial zoning. So an additional multifamily district would be compatible. And is it compatible with development pattern? There are no new roads being built here. It's using existing infrastructure. So I'm going to let Matt Hollander from the Hollander Company, who I believe is doing the presentation, come up and speak. I just want to say one other thing as he comes up here. Going back to that first slide, the larger parcel that I showed you, and I believe the applicant's going to talk about this, this is in the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, and a significant portion of this parcel is contaminated. And is a part of areas that are restricted from, there's 2 things. There's areas that are contaminated, and there are areas that are contaminated and restricted from development from the Department of Environmental Quality. And I believe that a developer will show exactly where those are on the map. But I just wanted to point that out to you. While I bring up the applicant's presentation, does anybody have any questions for me at this time?
Any technical questions for staff, commissioners? Okay, thank you. Would the applicant like to present their request?
Good evening, Commissioners. Matt Hollander. I am a resident of the City of Kalamazoo. And I'm going to talk tonight about what we're calling 333 East Alcott Street as a placeholder name. That is the name of the current parcel. As the city planner pointed out, this is part of a parent parcel, which is currently owned by City of Kalamazoo Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, and is nestled in what is being referred to as the Collaborative Health Campus off of Alcott Street. Currently, the parcel is 16.13 acres, according to City GIS. One thing that Ms. Anderson pointed out was that there's a restrictive covenant on this parcel right now, which is what's shown on this slide. The shaded area on either side of Portage Creek is restricted from development in perpetuity by MDEQ. This is a topo survey, and I don't expect you to be able to read it or draw any major information from that. But this is oriented, north is facing to your left, and there are certain hot spots to the upper left of the survey and on the south side of Portage Creek, pretty much the entire portion of the parcel south of Portage Creek east of Portage Creek and north of the recently rehabbed county health building there that are contaminated with landfilled coal ash from the former use as a paper mill site, which had its own power plant. That coal ash is a hazardous material and is, in our view, unsuitable for use for our purposes, because it would need to be removed at significant cost. So these are the areas that I'm talking about, outlined in red, which have the deposits of coal ash. Oriented with the map to the north, you can now see that the restrictive covenant area on either side of the Portage Creek, coupled with the areas with landfilled coal ash, leave a smaller portion of the parent parcel which would be suitable at this time for development without further environmental remediation. So that's how we get the 2.6 acre site that Ms. Anderson referenced. You see it in the top right hand of this proposed preliminary sketch for the land division, 2.6 acres and bounding on Belford to the east and Bryant Street to the south. This is what we're considering to be the project site for the project that we're currently contemplating. Preliminary site plan sketch shows a 51-unit multifamily apartment building, the purpose of which would be to provide permanent supportive housing for people suffering from substance use disorders referred by the Kalamazoo area drug treatment court system. We have residential single family on the other side of Belford Street, residential single family in the 4 parcels shown on this site plan to the south. This is a preliminary floor plan for building A, and it's a mixture at this point of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments with spaces for treatment services and community amenities within the complex. As a permanent supportive housing project, these would be permanent residents. This is not transitional housing. Typical floor plan for floors 2 and 3 of the same building. This is the larger of the 2 buildings shown at 3 stories. First and second floor plans for building B. Elevations for building A, the 3-story building, residential in character. It's been designed to look the same as any other multifamily residential building would appear. North and west elevations, elevations of building B. And again, this is a wider shot of the zoning map. Ms. Anderson pointed out RM15. There's also some RM36 shown in the top left corner of this portion of the map, and this is all within 1 mile of the development, the proposed development site. All of the dark brown is RM15. And this is a rendering of the building A, 3-story building, also showing residential in character, not unlike any other well-built multifamily dwelling. And I'll point out, while I still have a few minutes here, the purpose for asking for RM24 rather than RM15 is due to the restrictive covenant. We will have between the restrictive covenant area directly bounding this site and the Portage Creek and the site enough land area that we could support 15 units per acre. However, we didn't want to have to ask for a variance to acknowledge that green space, and with an RM24 designation, we will not have to go through a variance process. There will be the same amount of green space or more than what would be required under an RM15 designation.
Are there any questions for the applicant at this time?
I'm curious as to your plans for stormwater management.
Stormwater management is currently proposed as a stormwater detention pond, which, again, this is oriented north to the left. On the south end of the site, along Bryant Street, this preliminary site plan shows that being a stormwater retention basin. We are considering, based on community input, moving the entrance to the facility to Bryant Street, but we would still locate a stormwater retention basin on site. We are working to size our on-site stormwater detention basin to be sufficient to handle all of the stormwater on site unless there was an emergency overflow situation, in which case we would divert. We're hoping to work with the city to divert to existing storm sewer under Bryant Street. But we do not intend to try to discharge into the Portage Creek. I do have our architect for the project here, as well as our project attorney who's been working on the land division, in case anybody has technical questions that I'm incapable of answering.
I have a question just regarding the tenants. You said that this is long-term housing. Is there leases in place, or is this through a traditional lease?
This would be a traditional one-year lease, and the minimum amount of time that's being discussed at this time is 18 months for residency, and there would be no outside boundary, just like any other apartment complex.
Any special requirements for the lease that one wouldn't find at a traditional housing operation?
It would be a standard form lease.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time?
Can you hear me? All right, can you elaborate a little bit more on what Commissioner Wister was saying about the long term, and how is it that they can apply, and what's the criteria again?
So as permanent supportive housing, this would be a housing development that included supportive services and wraparound services for a particular target population. The target population in this case would be individuals referred from the Kalamazoo area drug treatment courts, particularly the 8th and 9th Circuit courts, who suffer from a substance use disorder and are currently in good standing in a drug treatment program ordered by the courts as a diversion from incarceration. The permanent nature of the housing is precisely the same as the permanent nature of any other housing if you were to move into an apartment complex and be a tenant in good standing with no lease violations. So if you're a good tenant who pays your rent and doesn't violate any other terms of the lease, you would have the option to stay there as long as you wanted to. I will add also part of the tenant selection criteria is that 50% or more of the individuals who would be referred to this housing would be recently homeless as defined by HUD, which is typical for permanent supportive housing projects.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time?
Well,
No?
I have another question. Has the other homeowners in the area been contacted, or has there been a person that actually that has contacted the homeowners in the area?
Yes. My associate and I walked door to door 2 weekends ago on Saturday, delivering additional information about the project beyond what would normally be distributed in a 300-foot radius in this sort of circumstance. We held a community meeting at the Edison Neighborhood Association last week that was standing room only, and we heard from several residents at that meeting, both for and against the project. We have gone out of our way to try and engage with residents in the neighborhood to make sure that everyone knows what's going on. And we have several people in the room today who I think are prepared to stand up in support of the project who are from the neighborhood.
Anyone else? Good, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will now open the public comment portion of the hearing. Or just a reminder, there is a 4-minute time limit. And we ask that you state your name and address before presenting your comments, and that you sign in at the podium to your left after you have completed your comments. With that, the floor is open.
My name is Jerry Hoffman,
Thank you.
My name is Jerry Hoffman, 614 Eggleston. I live 4 blocks from the proposed site. I'm also president of the board of the Edison Neighborhood Association. And I can't speak for the board. I was not given that authority. However, I can say that I was at this public meeting and that there was great hostility to this project. There's a lot of anger, and a psychologist will tell you that anger comes from fear, fear comes from a perceived danger or lack of knowledge about whether there will be a danger, and I think that's the problem. That this was, we felt, kind of sprung on us. It was just the last couple weeks that we had any notice at all. I also walked the neighborhood handing out flyers to that meeting, and I got an earful. One concern I have is that this is scheduled to be a homeless, low-income, multi-apartment dwelling. There's another one that's planned for a half mile away on Lake Street, which originally was going to be mixed income, and now my understanding is that it's almost entirely low income. And as president of the association, that concerns us, especially because in between the two, we have the senior housing, which is also relatively low income. We are already the largest populated neighborhood in the city, and we are not necessarily in favor of gentrification, but we're concerned of slumification. There were several issues brought up at the meeting. One was the question of security. There is going to be security at the location, but would there be security of the residents across the street? Sharon Ferraro wants to designate that area as a historic district because it has such heritage. So we are concerned about it. The speakers said that there would be additional police attention to the area if they have the housing. However, the police were not notified of the meeting, and they did not appear because they did not know it was going to be there. My other concern is that this is, as they said, the brownfield poisoned ground, and I'm wondering, is it wise to slap asphalt over this brownfield and let it sit there? Will that not leach into our drinking water and give us the same kind of hassle that we have in Richland and Parchment? I'd certainly like to have that addressed, and I feel that there were a lot of things that were not addressed before this thing came to here. Of course, the residents are concerned about their home values. We're also concerned that we want to make sure that we have assurance that the property will be maintained so it won't turn into a tenement at some point. So it comes back to information and knowledge. We want to be reassured that it's going to be well taken care of. And while no one at that meeting said they were against the program, they were worried about their property and their neighborhood. And that's all the concern they had. Nobody was against the idea of the program. And I guess that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name It's Dusty Jicama. I live on Stockbridge Avenue, about 4.5 blocks. In full disclosure, I am working with Ms. Anderson on a housing equitability project. But I'm here as a resident of Edison to talk about this. My background is in social work. I have a master's degree in social work from Western here, and I have worked in the city of Seattle on permanent supportive housing for approximately 7 years. Permanent supportive housing is the best model that we have to help people, especially with mental illness and drug use histories. If you look at the research, which I implore all of you to do, you go through the University of Washington and you look at the research that they've done with the Downtown Emergency Service Center, which operates 17 permanent supportive housing units. The first one was for people labeled chronic inebriates, so long-term alcohol use. It's the best model to reduce substance use issues, stabilize mental health. The best part of this is that there will be many, many services on site. So we have Kalamazoo County Mental Health Substance Abuse Services. We have the new public health building on Elcott. DHHS will be there. So it's easy access for all the residents. So there is concern by residents about house values, and as my neighbor said, slumification, but I will counter that too. If you look at the research, all the areas where they have built permanent supportive housing in the city of Seattle, not a single neighborhood had a decrease in housing value. Neither has there been an increase in crime in any of those neighborhoods. That's not just me saying that, having worked in it, that's what the research says. It's a long-term integration. Typically, people who are found in these housing, permanent supportive housing units become productive members of their community. They're often outside engaging with their community members. There was a lot of concern that these individuals will be out dealing drugs or buying drugs because they have that substance use history, but they are all in a program. They're all going through the court system. There will be many supports in place. And we typically see that people who have those kinds of histories but are in permanent supportive housing actually kind of rope in if someone is dealing and approaches them. They say, no, thank you, this is the program I am in. And they act as a support. So like a peer support to say, these are the services available. And in some instances in Seattle, they've actually seen drug use reduce when they put such housing in place. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Patrick Meninga, and I live at Shadow Bend, 3431 Shadow Bend Drive, 49048. And the reason I'm here is because I'm with Community Healing Centers, and if the project were to go through, then my understanding is Community Healing Centers would be part of stepping in and helping to staff the project, particularly the substance abuse part of the project. So currently I'm here and I work for Community Healing Centers, and I help run, or I do run, a recovery home for men that houses 12 men, and it's 90-day recovery housing. So it's kind of in the same ballpark as what we're talking about here. And so what I can tell you is to sort of speak to the need. And I know that a lot of the guys that come to my program and try to get in are coming from the mission or the drop-in. Some of them are referred by the courts, some of them aren't. And my general feeling is that there's a tremendous demand. And just today, it was a regular Tuesday, and I interviewed 4 different gentlemen to come into my program, and I only have 12 beds. So there's tremendous demand there. In addition to that, I've found that it's fairly difficult for me to place individuals who are trying to leave my program. Sometimes they'll have a felony in their past because of their substance abuse issues. They got in trouble with the law and they have a felony. And I didn't even realize this, but it's legal for landlords to discriminate against felons. You don't have to house a felon. You can say, no, don't even apply. And so not only is there a tremendous need for recovery housing in the short term, but there's also, I'm seeing a need for recovery housing after they leave my program, which is only up to 90 days. And so it's very difficult sometimes. And even if they come in and they're doing good and they're doing therapy, they're doing meetings, they're doing all the right things, and they're even working. They're getting a job. They've got income now. Even then, it can be really difficult for them to find placement, to get a landlord that'll take them on. And so a lot of those people just sort of get spit back into the system, and it's really unfortunate. So that's why I'm here today with community healing centers, just sort of speaking to the demand and the need for this. I see it on the, I'm in the trenches. I interviewed 4 guys today who were saying, hey, I got substance abuse problems and I need a place to live. And that was their only real fault. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Kay Sanders. I work with community healing centers. I live in Marcellus, but I grew up in Kalamazoo County. And I'm speaking to you tonight as the coordinator for the recovery housing program at community healing centers. Currently, I oversee 3 houses in Kalamazoo, 1 in St. Joe, 1 in Cass County, and soon to be another one in Kalamazoo County, so that would make it the total of 4. I brought with me today some of the faces of the women that I have. We are the only house in Kalamazoo County that allows women with children under the age of 8 to stay with them while they work on their recovery. And again, like Pat said, we are a 90-day program, but we have this bottleneck. At the end of 90 days, I have the option of putting women and children on the street or letting them stay, and there's no revenue. It doesn't help them. They are defeated. There's no place for them to go. So this project not only provides that place to go, but it also adds the continuum of therapy. It allows for them to continue working. It's not just a house. It's therapy, individual, group. There's security measures. And I can honestly say that in the 3 houses that I've run in Kalamazoo County, we have not had the police called one time. We do not have crime. As a matter of fact, some of the ladies run the dealers off the street because they're proud of their recovery and they know they're working very hard at it. And they don't want their children around it. So more than just the average face of what comes to mind when you think person addicted to substances, I wanted to show you these are moms that are, to no fault of their own, fallen into addiction. These are women who have suffered unimaginable traumas and chose substances as a means to get out of bed in the morning. These are not horrible people. These are not, people that are going to bring the community down. We currently have 3 houses in Kalamazoo County, and a lot of people don't know that, and that's good. So, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jason. I'm here to represent, I was at New Beginnings. It's part of Elizabeth Upjohn. And they say the greatest thing that one person could do is to give to people, because when people start to give, they find it rewarding. So, this would be giving an opportunity for people to give their life a change, having, convictions or whatever, or just poor circumstances in their life. It'd give them an opportunity to change their life for the better. Without a bed, how are they going to dream? There was a time when I thought that housing, cars, jobs, those things were for other people. My perspective has changed over the years. So I think it'd just be a great opportunity to put people in the community that are both helping themselves, helping other people. That's their goal, is to give away what they have. So I don't see how it'd be, a detriment to the community whatsoever. I think it's a win-win situation. It'd help people get on their feet, do positive things with their life, help the community, and I think it's a great idea. So that's all I got.
Hey, Jason, did you sign in? I wasn't watching. Thank you.
Hi there, everyone. My name's Ryan Ziegler, 706 Oak Street, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Elizabeth Upjohn Healing Center, and basically what it's done for me, and as an addict myself who's gone through these steps and tried to get housing. Getting out of treatment, the most difficult thing I faced was getting housing. Where am I going to go? And I think if we take a look outside right now, we can see housing is a big issue. So I'm not sure those people's situations, but I'm sure it's probably similar to what I went through. Thankfully, I was able to make it through and get to where I am now. But if we had something like this available, there'd be a lot more people with me. Unfortunately, there's a stigma with people in addiction. But there's an epidemic going on. I was addicted to heroin So, you know, I was up and down these streets multiple times, stayed at the Mission. I'd go to the hospital, sit around there. You know, I overdosed outside of the hospital. I've gone through these things multiple times, and to have people kind of judge us based on our past actions and not what we're trying to do is unfortunate. But I can attest to what the Community Healing Center provides, and that's a great service that's been pivotal in my recovery. So I know if these people get into this housing and they really truly want it, anything is possible. It's going to be beneficial to them and the community to have somewhere where these people can go besides just being outside, which causes problems and conflicts and multiple levels that affects every level of the community. I live on Oak Street. I see homelessness all the time, and people don't have an outlet. The Mission's great. You know, I've slept there. It was a nice place to be at that time, but to really build a foundation, you need something like this building and the services it provides. I know a lot of guys in drug court. Does everyone make it through? No. But it's not going to be you get in drug court and you get this housing. You're going to be offered this opportunity to get in said housing, and what you make of it is your choice. So I think this would be a beneficial thing, and I know with the community support and the people who are involved right now, good can come out of this. This isn't going to be something that's going to be a stigma to the community, in my opinion. I think it's going to provide more of a police presence by them going by there. Drug court and the police kind of work together hand in hand here. So I don't see that being an issue. I think it can increase value in the community there. People will know this is a flagship kind of program. So yeah, there's going to be ups and downs, but I see it as being highly beneficial, nothing less. Are there going to be bumps in the road? We'll see. But I think it can provide great help and provide some relief to the community. People are dying. This isn't a joke. This is serious stuff where I've had 10, 15 friends die in the past year from the heroin alone. So if this can save at least one of those lives, it'd be beneficial. So thank you guys so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm Susan Hill. I live at 1614 Portage Street in Edison. And I would welcome this building next to our house, but unfortunately, you can't put it there. I am for this. These people struggle. If you've ever tried to do a diet and you failed, it's not that big of a deal. These people, when they try this, it means their life if they fail. They could overdose and die. They need our support. What's Kalamazoo for if they're not going to help these people? We're trying to make this a better city. I think this could really help, and I'm all for it. And I certainly hope that you will agree to this. Yes, there probably are a few things like the retention pond and a few other things, but I think those can be worked out in the long run. And I think you need to think about these people. They need our support more than somebody that's on a diet. You know, if you're on a diet, you get support from other people. These people definitely need our support, and all these support resources are right near them. Most of them probably don't have vehicles, so they can't live outside the city and come in to get support. And these are not low-income people. A lot of them probably are middle income. You know, if you're thinking about a drug addict as being somebody that's coming from the gutter, the ghetto, and they've always been there, that may not be the case. You may be dealing with somebody that has a college degree that lost their job because of this, and they're trying to get started again, and they need help. And I think we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Wilson. This is my husband, Trevor Wilson, and we are in recovery, and thankfully to the community healing centers.
Yes, her address is 722 South Rose Street. She lives at the Bethany House right downtown. My address is 1910 Schaefer Street. I stay at the New Beginnings, ran by Patrick. I am here to attest that community healing centers and places like them that gave us a chance at recovery saved our lives. We were addicts, had been for quite some time. We're married. We never knew anything else as a couple, and then we found out my wife was pregnant with her first child, with my first child, and we didn't know what to do. We found out once she was already 4 months pregnant, had been using the whole time, and it terrified us. And we reached out to many different places. We were coming from Holland, and by the luck of God, we reached out to Kay Sanders. She immediately got my wife into treatment here in Kalamazoo, which is very difficult to do when you're coming from Ottawa County. Shortly after my wife left, she got me into treatment. We went from living in a hotel to being able to actually start a life. I now work with community healing centers. I work at the Gilmore Center. They gave me an internship through there. I don't make very much, but it allows me to provide a little bit for my family while I continue to look for a more permanent job. They are helping me look for housing outside of it, and I have no felonies. My wife doesn't really have a record either, and even without felonies, it can be very difficult to find permanent housing. They do credit scores, they do all different types of stuff, background checks, and not all landlords want people that we look like to come through there, and that's difficult to do, and that's why we are so adamant about a place like this being built, because when someone gets a little bit of help, it's really amazing what they can really do. And that's all it took for us, was a little bit of help. I mean, when you're in the depths and you're down low, I mean, it's very difficult to get out, but when there's people that actually care about you and are looking to help you, it's amazing what you can do. And so we just came to support this. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Leticia McKissick. I reside at 1003 Southern Avenue. As I'm listening and everything, you sit there and you wonder which one came first, the chicken or the egg. So when we're doing this evaluation, I agree. I think that our community needs help. I think that the drug epidemic is out of control, and we need to figure out where do we go from here. My concern is that, yeah, it's a good thing, but what are we going to do long term? What are you going to offer to the residents that are in that community? What are you going to offer? Are you going to offer long-term security? Not just like a one-year contract, or something that's going to give us a little bit more like security, and letting us know, because we already have children. We're not far from children and sex offenders. Not saying that all drug addicts are sex offenders or low income or homeless, but these are also things that I've invested in my community. And I think that we should kind of consider those things for the security purposes. And someone had said that the other homes are unknown, because that are in the community for other people that are recovering from addiction. This is not an unknown place. And we just need to make sure that you keep my home just as safe as anybody else's. And that's kind of how I feel. My other thing is what is the cost to the people that are surrounding? What is the tax increase? How is that going to affect my taxes? How is that going to affect everything that's going on and what happens at 1003? And that's why I was saying about the chicken and the egg. I think that some things, just because we put a building there, but if we don't have everything that goes along with what's going on inside of that building, then we've defeated the purpose. So if we don't have a program in place already of what happens, what are the guidelines and all of this, then we've just wasted our taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Monica Gardner, and I live at 737 Eggleston Avenue, and I'm in the Edison area. I want to start with just saying, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. Up until the age of 12, I lived in the Bond Project. The project was a design that was meant just like this community building here for low income. And over the years of living in that, I've watched and saw 33 people get shot and killed. I watched and saw people do drug deals. I watched and saw all of the tragics that a human being could go through in the local income housings. My mom moved away from there when I was 12. And I was 12 when I saw all of this, before the age of 12. But moving out of there, the only way we got out of there was that my father died. That was the only way that we got out, because the system was designed where you were never meant to leave. The system, that's what I want to discuss. What is the system, and what are they going to do about it? What can they do to ensure the homeowners and surrounding in that area are safe and their property values stay intact? What can you do to make sure that kids never experience or see what I seen when I was growing up in the project? And my projects were stacked 9 stories high. These are only 3 stories, but they're spread out. And so now you're already putting people into a community, into a troubled area that you know have problems. Those problems aren't fixed and nobody's trying. And for them to say, oh, the police is going to do this, we haven't heard from them. They didn't come in and comment. This here was hearsay and what we think and what we think should be. And nobody has guaranteed us anything. I just wanted to say, I don't want to live in another project or even be part of it. And I hope and pray that nobody ever have to experience what I've experienced growing up. It was tragic. And I hate to even think about it. It just makes me cry to know that I had to grow up in a place like that. And my father died at the age of 40. He was an alcoholic. He worked for the VA 22 years. He was a veteran. And he had his issues. That's why we were in the project. And it was supposed to help. It never helped them. And nobody was governor or nobody was the keeper to make sure that those things happen. Is this project going to be the same? And are there any guarantees that this can never be like that? It was just as bad as being in the Chicago projects. This is another project. And in our area, the Edison, I say no. I'm not for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Larry Hill. I live at 1614 Portage Street, and I'm an addict. I almost died twice because none of this was available for me at the time. I am, by the grace of God, a recovering addict of 31 years. Prison doesn't work. It doesn't fix things. And this country right now is being buried in a sea of bodies. More people are dying in this country every year than die in traffic accidents. Think about that for a minute. This is something that the community needs. For everyone that wants a guarantee, I'm sorry, it doesn't exist. I was at the meeting at the Edison neighborhood, and a lot of what I heard was, you guys are doing great, we approve of everything that you're trying to do, but not in my neighborhood, not in my backyard. And I ask all of those people there the same question I'm going to ask you. If not here, where? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Turberg, and my address is 2016 Barney Road. And I came just to have a little bit of a voice in here. I've worked for a boarding school for juvenile delinquent teens. I used to work for Kalamazoo County Friend of the Court, and I've seen, you know, how not having available transitional housing has affected kids and people in our community. So I'm asking that you do implement this. I personally have a cousin who made some bad life choices, and he went to prison for drug use. And when he did his time, he came out, he was looking for housing, and he couldn't find any that was outside of the area that he initially got into trouble with. So it was just like taking him out, giving him a chance to make good with his life, and then bring him right back into an area that I guess, I don't know the right word to use, but he just fell back into the same circle, right? So having housing like this, I do feel would be beneficial for the community to give them a chance that's not in the same area, in a bad area, that would put them right back at square one again. And really that's all I wanted to say, just to have a voice and say thank you for listening. So that's it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Samantha Williams, and I currently stay at the Bethany House. I can say that if it wasn't for the Bethany House, I wouldn't have my daughter back or a chance to change my life for my daughter. I think it's a great idea for her in the future or whatever, for people to have a more stable place after all this, because it is hard to find a place to live, even with a daughter, you know. But I want my daughter not to grow up in what I grew up in, you know. So I don't know. That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
My name is Samantha Norg. I also reside at the Bethany House. I was in KPEP. I caught my first felony charge. I'm 28 years old. I was terrified, been addicted to meth for about 15 years of my life. Came from a middle-class family, lived in Parchment, high, you know, nice house. And when I got put in jail, I didn't know how, I didn't know any other life. And when I got put in KPEP, and I'm in drug court, I'm in criminal drug court, my caseworker reached out to Kay and said that I needed housing to be able to get out of KPEP. And Kay let me move in. I am about to receive my children back. I just wanted to say that we need more housing for people who have drug addictions. It's not our fault. It's like someone with diabetes, they can't help it, you know. I want to say that we're not bad people. We're good, you know, we're good people with a sickness. And we just need more help and more support around the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Jamie Cavanaugh. I live at 923 South Park. I own additional properties in the Vine neighborhood, and I own a property in the Edison neighborhood. I'm here in favor of this project. Personally, where I live, there are 5 places that support recovery of one addiction or another within 2 blocks of me. There are 3 houses on one street, which is less than a block from me. They're the best houses on on that street. They're great neighbors, never a problem from either of the other 2 places that are that close. I think that some of these fears are unfounded. I think what's going to happen is that this project will bring not really a spotlight, but it will brighten that area of the neighborhood and push the drug dealers away. I have experience with that because when I bought my building in Vine 26 years ago, there were probably half a dozen units and apartments in old homes around me that were dealing drugs on a regular drive-up basis. So again, I'm just here to support this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Majua Brand Ellerby. I'm for the program, but I have a lot of concerns. I understand about drug addiction. I understand about housing. I understand that it's hard to find housing. That just because you're on drugs doesn't mean it's easy for you and it's not easy for other people. You know, the concept is that I don't really know how this plan is actually going to work, but if somebody's building some housing for people, you know, hopefully that it will work, because we don't really know, but we want it to work. You know, everybody need housing. So I would love to know more about the plan that they're talking about and how it's going to exist and how they're going to manage it and how much clean time do you need to have to live in these houses alone. So that is a concern. So, you know, I understand that anybody living around, it doesn't matter, because sometimes you don't know who on drugs around you anyway, you know, because, you know, everybody is maintaining life. You know, it's called living life on life terms. So we can't say these people, we're just saying people who need housing. So I don't like the word of these people and these addicts and all this, because we don't know, people are addicted to a lot of things. But I would like to know more about how this housing will work, you know, and so I'm gonna wanna commit myself to find out more about it, because I would love to see the plan go into action. I understand what the lady was talking about in other projects. We don't want that. We want to be able to have affordable housing for everybody, you know, and I just don't want it to be a distinction on just because you're an adult that you need a house. So that's what I'm here to just to say, is just to put my information out there that I would like to know more about it, and thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Alejandro Rodriguez. I live on Washington Street in the Edison neighborhood. I'd like to read something that I wrote on my notes while I was sitting here. I don't have much information about this project other than what I heard here this afternoon. I just found about this yesterday. One of the things that I would like to mention regarding this project that is in motion is the fact of the possibilities and the opportunities that could come from this. Anytime there's a chance to apply growth to our community and our city, we as a people should be all for it. This is our home, and we should always be prepared to grow in any angle of life. Another thing I would like to point out is how this could help with the drug use and criminal activity happening in our city. I do volunteer ministry at KPEP, which for those who don't know, KPEP is a correctional facility. In KPEP, there are plenty of resources that can be provided. One thing that I've noticed is that they do lack in housing for the individuals upon release. A lot of people I meet and build relationships with lack in housing, and that's a big thing that prevents them from getting jobs and having a fresh start to a new life when they do get released. Most of these folks, they get released, and a lot of them are afraid to go back to where they where they were living at, because of the circumstances that they're going to walk back into. And that's what got them, you know, arrested in the first place. So being able to go to a clean place that these people can call their home, it's an amazing opportunity that we can provide. I also do street ministry every Tuesday and every Friday with outreach. So I hear and see a lot of things that most of you guys don't. I have faith that all the resources we need to build a stronger and better city will be provided to us. Now, whether we choose to use them or not, that's the question we should ask ourselves. The reason I do street ministry is to share my testimony and do life on life with people. I plan on trying to help change and encourage the people that live in our city to do better and to continue to seek growth. There's so much opportunity in our city, and this project that we're talking about today is a great one. Now, I've been homeless before, I've been jobless, I've been addicted to drugs, and I've also spent time in prison. From the age of 11 to the age of 15, I was living a savage life. I started to turn my life around upon release in 2015. A little bit later after that, I had my baby girl. The things I do today, I never imagined doing. Career job, buying my first home, doing street ministry, hosting youth groups, volunteering my time at KPEP and helping those individuals grow from the circumstances that they're at, and even helping the police department with the GVI program. Now, I say all this regarding the fact that there wasn't many opportunities like this when I was growing up, like some of the individuals here said. But now that we're growing into providing such resources and such opportunities, I believe that we should all grasp onto these and take full action into making it happen. We can make our city a better place to live, and we could do it together. I pray over this project and ask God's grace to be completed and for His will to be done. Thank you, and be blessed.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sally Reams, and I work at Community Healing Centers too. I happen to have the privilege of being the executive director there. And I wasn't going to talk tonight until that lovely woman asked a very sensible question. What's the plan? How are things going to go on there? And the probably this committee meeting isn't the right place to describe the plan, but Community Healing Centers is going to be managing the house. Is that the right word? Managing, sort of. We're going to be running the services within the housing development plan, the apartments. We've been doing housing for many years, starting with Hope House in Sturgis, and now you heard people talking about Bethany House. So we have a lot of experience with housing, and especially housing with people in early recovery. We've probably got about 25 years of experience with housing, and especially with those people who are looking for early recovery and extending their recovery to family recovery, which is a lot of what we see. So I know the person that was speaking, and we've known each other for a long time too. So we're going to get together and make sure that we can spread that word about what the plan actually is. That's a really important piece of it. So I appreciate your tolerance and patience of all the interesting comments and questions. And if you do have questions about the plan, I could answer them tonight, but I think it would be more appropriate if we expanded on that with actual paper and note information. But we are going to be directly involved with managing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Karen Stam. I live at 1509 Hayes Park. I've lived there for pretty near 20 years. I was down there at the time when they had the strip bar, and the minute they moved the strip bar out of the neighborhood, it was uplifting, and people were trying to make the Edison neighborhood better again. So all I am seeing is if this, I'm not against the idea of the housing or anything. It's just, I want to see the neighborhood grow, but I want it to look better than what it does now, because we already have problems. And all I can see is more problems. And it's an area that's suitable for families because the taxes are low, and there's already a school there, and actually 2 schools. And as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to see it be a neighborhood like it was 30 or 40 years ago. But I'm sure that's hard for people to comprehend, but it was a very pretty area in the day. So my guess is the location is wrong, but I think you could put it somewhere else. It's needed, but not in that area, in that location. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Cheryl Case. I live at 1228 Franklin Street, Edison neighborhood. A big concern of most of the people who were at the community meeting on the 16th was the fact that there were judges in attendance, there were 2 news crews in attendance, there were the good people from the rehabilitation and recovery places, and yet we, the people who live in the Edison neighborhood, knew nothing about this. The title of it, 333 East Alcott Street, is very misleading. It's going to be nowhere near Alcott Street. It's going to be in the middle or on the very west side of an established neighborhood. The concern was it seemed a done deal and that we weren't going to be heard. And I think that's kind of still a concern because we're not against recovery. We're not against giving people a second chance, first chance, a hand up, not a handout, but we don't know what's going to happen. There are no details. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chris Pompey, and I am a resident of Kalamazoo. I am not here to oppose the project. I actually stood here about a year ago opposing something on a smaller scale, and I was faced with a whole lot of opposition. So my prayer is that leading up to this, that we are more aware, more educated on the problem that stands within Kalamazoo. I'm a case manager, supervisor with a program within Kalamazoo, so I work with a lot of individuals that are dealing with housing and homelessness, women and men that have nowhere to go. I believe one of the reasons we hear, and a lot of the community may not know, but projects like this are only allowed in certain zoning ordinances. So I guess one of the things I would like to propose tonight is we have a lot of building going on in Kalamazoo. We got a lot of bells and whistles to make downtown look good and attract tourists. But there's an undercurrent of a problem that's taking place within Kalamazoo that's not being addressed. I specialize in substance abuse. I have 3 college degrees in substance abuse. So it's not a secret of what's going on. But why don't we work together, and if it can't be at this location, then where will we designate it to be? Because like this project, there are still more services that need to be developed to help individuals that are faced with these type of crisis. So I get the concern in the community, especially something this large in scale, but it's definitely needed. So if not here, then what would be some other locations that the city is willing to rezone for such projects, opposed to constantly turning them down and oppose them and criminalizing the individuals that have nowhere to go and they wind up recycling back in the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you sign in, Chris?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Is there any other public comment? All right. I will note we received some additional correspondence, which we have on our desks here, planning commissioners. All right. With that, I'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, do you have any questions for staff at this time?
Are there other projects currently being proposed for this larger brownfield area?
No, not at this time. I think the map that the applicant showed, a good chunk of this, of what's left for this site is restricted covenant, and so will remain open. The property along Reed Street, it's about 1.5 acres, is currently quite contaminated. So it's not that you couldn't develop there in the future, but it's going to take quite additional a cleanup effort. Related to your comment and something that one of the speakers said about other projects in the area, and they referred to a project on Lake Street. There is a project going in, or proposed to go in. It's not going in. It's got still some steps to go through, but at Lake and Portage Street, and is referred to as low-income housing. I want to clarify to workforce housing, which I think this commission knows is not exactly the same thing. It's different income levels. And so that project is a mix of workforce and market rate housing. So I did want to clarify that.
Any other questions?
One of the speakers mentioned the contaminated land, so I was wondering if there was any research on building on contaminated land, specifically former paper mills, in light of the recent PFAS issue.
So I can say what I know, and it's possible that the applicant's engineer or team would know, provide a little more information. My understanding is that the contamination is that the coal ash is the largest issue for this property, and it is stockpiled to the north and then to the west, and those are the areas of heaviest contamination. All brownfield projects go through a series of environmental studies to understand what is being dealt with. It's in the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, so some initial understanding has been done, which is why this part of the property is currently being redeveloped as opposed to the one that is severely contaminated.
Yes.
Well, yes. What health risks are there in the coal ash that they're considered? Has there been a study as far as what type of cancers or any type of what's the risk, health risk in that?
That is not something that I am able to answer. But again, this project is looking at a parcel that is not where the coal ash is, and that's one of the reasons why this property is being developed of the larger parent parcel. It is why this part is being developed prior to the other areas, which would need more specialized development techniques.
Anyone else have a question? Yes.
Regarding the safety issues, some of the people talked about being bordering on the neighborhood here, that there may be some issues with safety to that neighborhood or changes to the current patterns. Was KPS or public safety notified or will they look into some sort of assessment regarding that in the near future?
So what I can say is that the project team includes many judges and drug courts and folks that work with KDPS regularly. In terms of looking at it from a zoning perspective, you know, the request on the table is to rezone the property to residential multifamily 24.
I understand.
Right?
That.
And so, you know, in terms of impacts that relate to zoning, some of those concerns are, you know, those concerns are not generally addressed by the zoning code.
I realize it may not be germane. I was just wondering if, you know, those were going to be addressed. A number of the people in the community are concerned about that. So I just wanted to see if that, you know, had been communicated or if that needs to open up.
The applicant is welcome to come back up during this window, and if you can ask him more technical questions regarding the project itself, he would be far more equipped to answer those questions than I would.
I can't speak on behalf of KDPS, obviously. We do have a meeting scheduled with KDPS representatives, and our goal is to get a firm commitment from them that we can state publicly. We do not have a commitment from them yet. They are aware of the project, and we did have a public safety official in a preliminary site plan review meeting who did not bring up any issues related to neighborhood safety at that meeting. But we are attempting to address those citizen concerns in a meaningful way. Best I can do.
Thank you.
I have a question that perhaps you can help elaborate on a bit. I was hearing all the public comments, and it, you know, obviously there's a lot of emotion with regards to this project here, but I just want to remind us all that we're here to approve a zoning change from manufacturing to R24 residential, mixed-use residential, and what you propose is essentially a multifamily housing development. It sounds like the business model does include some collaboration, at least. I'm not sure how formal that is. I guess it's my question, with drug courts and some other supportive social service agencies. Your firm is obviously a for-profit firm, well-established, well-respected firm, but it is a for-profit firm. It's not a social service agency. What I'm curious about is from a I guess from the development's perspective, what is the long-term business plan? Or do you plan to own this long-term? Is this a collaborative type development? Is this, what's to say in 5 years if this could just become low-income housing? Or if you can speak to that, perhaps.
The payment of rent will occur via MISHDA project-based vouchers on units where individuals qualify as extremely low income. People with project-based vouchers pay 30% of their income for rent, even if their income is zero. And those vouchers are what allow for us to treat it the same way as we would any other apartment complex. Rent comes in, leases are signed. We would be using one-year leases just like we would anywhere else. As to the long-term operation of the facility, this project will be filed with MISHDA for low-income housing tax credits in October, and that will be a critical piece of financing to make the project work. In connection with that, we'll have to sign a regulatory agreement stating that it will remain affordable housing for probably a period of 45 years. And we will also be going to MISHDA as a permanent supportive housing project with the understanding and with evidence to support that we will run this as a permanent supportive housing project for at least 15 years. And as part of that, we will have to evidence all financing in place for the real estate portion of it, as well as funding commitments for the service portion of it, which will be separate from the property management and ownership obligations. So the concerns that people have are well-founded that we may run out of money at some point, but this particular project is structured in such a way that the likelihood of that is extremely, extremely low. We have to set up very substantial reserves to show MISHDA that we're well-funded for at least a 15-year period, and we will have to have mountains of evidence for them to support that this is not going to run out of money.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
I guess this is directed to both Planner Anderson as well as the applicant. What is the tax status going to be of this property? Will this be on tax rolls, or will
this project will apply for a payment in lieu of taxes from the City Commission?
Right on. Thanks.
Any other? Wait, pardon me. I'm sorry, ma'am. We're public comment period is closed. Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, when you said, can we elaborate a little bit more as far as how this be paid for with taxes? Is this the neighborhood being taxed more, or is this the whole city or county being taxed?
No, sir. This project would be privately financed. We are not asking for any sort of millage or bond issue from the community. The tax credits under the low-income housing tax credit program are monetized with investors from banks and other financial institutions, and we are not looking to the community to come up with the funds for this other than requesting a payment in lieu of taxes, which is typical for a low-income or any sort of affordable housing project.
We do in the city 3 to 5, the acronym is pilot, payment in lieu of taxes, projects a year, and they get reviewed by the City Commission. And they have resolutions of support associated with them. So it is something that a tool that the city uses frequently to support affordable housing programs in the city.
But that tool supports a reduction in operating costs, not coming up with the money to build the project. The project will be privately financed.
Yeah, I have another question. And this is something a little different, but is there any other plans or any other site plans besides this one, if this one doesn't work, that you guys are looking at, or is this the only one?
This is the only property within the county that we've identified as a suitable candidate for this particular project. We have not identified any other parcels that we feel would work in a way where we can deliver the supportive services effectively and also meet the requirements of the zoning ordinances.
And the other detail, Commissioner Pitts, and maybe he answered your question perfectly, but site plan is another process that this project has to go through. So stormwater, driveway access, doing a double check to make sure we're meeting all zoning requirements is all part of the site plan review process. Fire marshal, all of those folks are involved in that, and so that would be the step that would follow this.
All right, finally it's my turn. Okay, can you clarify what is the request before us tonight?
Sure. So the request is to rezone a portion of 333 East Elcott, which is the parent parcel. It's about 2.6 acres from M1, which is manufacturing district, to RM24, which is a residential multifamily district. And that is the proposal that's before you tonight. And so the question that the commissioners have to face, and I talked about it a bit in my presentation, is the proposed zoning district appropriate for this location? And so that is the heart of the request that's in front of you today. And ultimately, 333 East Elcott Street will not be the ultimate address of the property. Addressing is involved. Just for your reference, addressing tends to happen as we do site plan. We have corner parcels, what's the address? It goes through the assessor's office and is done during the site plan review process.
So while the zoning nerd in me has appreciated all of these comments and all of this discussion, I think it's great feedback for the ultimate development of the site, however it should go. That is not necessarily germane to this particular request. Our request is based on those 5 standards that you identified earlier. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Okay.
The zoning code does not judge a population that's within a structure, but talks about the appropriateness of the zoning district. And so, is it compatible with the future land use plan? Is it compatible with adjacent development? And those other 3 criteria that I mentioned. You guys have face a similar issue when you look at transitional residences, which this is not, but it's a similar question that comes up to you. You know, the things that you tend to look at are, you know, is there parking? Is a lot large enough? Things that the zoning code regulates.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I have one last question. I apologize that I have to keep running out. I have a 5-year-old who has drank too much juice tonight. But as I was leaving, I heard that the property would be paying payment in lieu of taxes. I'm curious as to why this wouldn't be a taxed property, if the property owner is a for-profit entity.
So developments in the city have the opportunity projects in the city can request a payment in lieu of taxes. It's something that has to be approved by the city commission, which it has not yet been approved for this project. We tend to have 3 or 4 a year, and it's a tool that the city does to help support affordable housing projects within the city.
So that would
to
be a
help kind of
decision-
balance the ultimate finances
So that
for
would
the
be a
project.
decision that hasn't been made yet.
Right, that's the city commission has to review that.
Got it. Thank you.
So if the rezoning is approved, what is the ultimate approval process for the proposed project that's in front of us?
Well, so this body does not make the final decision on zoning issues. You make a recommendation to the city commission, and so it would go before the city commission. It takes 2 readings to go through city commission approval. It's on the consent agenda, which basically just sets up a public hearing, and then the city commission does a public hearing. And those would be slated for September. Beyond that, the developer is seeking approvals from the state, not approvals, seeking low-income housing tax credits from the state, as well as going through the pilot process. So that's the applicant's burden to go through and do that process with the state. There is an October filing deadline for that.
And in terms of the actual development plan that we're looking at, is which is not subject to our approval or review tonight. Is that going to be reviewed at all?
Thank you. I did not state that one.
Okay.
So yes, site plan. All projects have to go through site plan approval.
Okay.
This project will be going through site plan approval over the next 6 weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
And you all will be noticed, you know, of that. The neighborhood association receives a copy of the site plan for neighborhood review.
So then it's in that process that a lot of the issues that were brought up tonight probably be addressed, or we'll have later time to do it. We're just doing the zoning tonight, essentially.
Right, this body does not make decisions on site plans.
Are there any other questions for staff or the applicant?
I actually have another one, and I guess this could be rolled into a site plan discussion, but as we're considering the question of is this an appropriate use of this land, we have to keep in mind and I'm sorry for this word, but the riparian aspect of where this is. It's along a river. Is this really appropriate use to be putting a housing development on a river where we're currently facing, you know, we've had a 100-year and recently a 500-year flood? Is this an appropriate use? You know, long term, how will this affect the watershed, you know, throughout the rest of the neighborhood? I know there's been a lot of concerns addressed from the KDCC development, the healthy campus that has caused, you know, unknowingly flooding issues for families and houses that are surrounded there. I guess what is the thought on that? I don't know how to separate that from site plan review, because we are talking about, is this appropriate to be a housing development?
Well, the city, I mean, it is in the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, and it's a parcel that the city has studied for its appropriateness for redevelopment in some fashion. So I guess to some extent, the city believes, well, the city does believe that this parcel can be redeveloped. There are certainly stormwater issues that the project will have to manage, and I think the applicant touched on them a little bit about how the project won't be discharging into the creek. The other thing, and Matt, if you want to go back to the slide that shows the DEQ, you know, there is a large portion of the site that's going to be open, larger than would be required by the zoning code if this were not, you know, DEQ restricted or a brownfield site. So that area, the restricted covenant does provide opportunity for kind of that natural ability for a creek to overflow its banks and not necessarily impact development. Because of where it's located, it would certainly, through site plan, our stormwater engineers will be taking a very close look at it.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Well then, at this time, I think we need a motion of some sort. Remember, we're looking for a recommendation to the City Commission on the rezoning issue in front of us.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the City Commission to approve the rezoning request PC 2018-13.
Do we have a second?
Support.
All right, now we can open it up for discussion on the motion. Would Commissioner Koss, would you like to kick us off?
Oh, I just like to say it's a good project. You know, a lot of positive support on it. Of course, that's not an issue here. What's at issue here is that we have a zoning issue on the table. The ARM 24 was explained. That makes total sense. I think it's a great location because it's adjacent to necessary services, et cetera, and you know, I'm going to vote to approve on it.
Any other comments or discussion? Ditto. Ditto. Nice.
Comment. Unfortunately, we're not in a position where we don't have any purview about the feasibility of a business that wants an area rezoned or the feasibility of a development. Really, responsibility is, are we using the land within the city of Kalamazoo appropriately? However, I will say it does seem very appropriate to be taking land that was left desolate and brownfield and unusable to provide an opportunity for families who have had desolate lives, who have been unusable, to have an opportunity to redevelop their life through this redevelopment. I do have concerns about stormwater management. I think that's something that has to be really at our forefront as we're considering land use. I know, I trust our site plan review system will take care of that, but I think that's something that really has to be, as a body, really kind of at the forefront. We've seen the effects, especially in our lowest income neighborhoods, that the flood recently had, and I think we need to be very, that needs to be very at the forefront. Sorry, lack of good words. But I really think this hits the needs that we have on multiple levels. This is going to spur development because Hollander's going to purchase products. It's going to pay people to build the building. There's really great things I think that we can see happening as a result of development. And I think we're silly to let this land be fallow. I will be voting in support.
Any other comments? Well, when I look at the criteria for the rezoning, this is clearly consistent with the master plan. The master plan calls for this to be neighborhood edge, and residential 2, RM24 fits squarely within those pegs. And the other criteria that were identified. And then with the shared prosperity initiative, we've got a parcel of land that's currently zoned manufacturing. We could have an industrial site there and an industry built there. And with this rezoning, regardless of whether it's as proposed or otherwise, housing is a far better alternative than industry in that site. So I just want to put that on the record. Any other comments?
Comment. Well, I am, I think that there's a big need for help for people with addictions, and so in that sense, the project is great. But one of my main concerns that really has just gotten me, the whole time is that being able to go and look at that that brownfield area, and just the thought of it still being contaminated in some areas, and as a city, we're not really knowing exactly what's the long-term health effects to it, to actually put families in that area without knowing everything about what's that's gonna cause in the long term for people that's kind of already at a disadvantage, and not and more just, I want to say, just in a predicament in their lives where they could be vulnerable because they're not really able to choose where they want to live. And just, is it wise for us to, house a place or build on a place that's been contaminated for years without us knowing exactly what it is that we're getting ourselves into? And that's one of my main concerns.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, may we have a roll call vote, please?
What's that?
Yes.
Bias? Yes. Pitts?
No.
Milliken?
Yes.
Greenman Wright? Yes. Koss?
Yes.
Barton?
Yes. The motion is approved, and again, this will be recommended to the City Commission. And thank you all for your attendance and your comments on all sides. It was humbling to sit here tonight, so thank you. Next on the agenda, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business?
We have none.
Moving on to new business.
Did we miss communications and announcements?
We did not miss communications and announcements.
Oh,
Did you
I
miss
missed it.
communications and announcements?
You must have missed it.
Aye, aye. Okay, new business.
Oh, that's me, isn't it?
That's you,
Yeah, that's all right. You're excused for a moment. Yeah, do you want
Commissioner Milliken, do we have a quorum if I were to abstain?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep.
Okay. For the record, I will be abstaining from this next PC because of a conflict.
Okay.
The case before you now is not a public hearing. It's kind of an unusual request. And Director Fletcher from Parks and Rec is here, and I'm going to let him take over. I'm just going to very quickly introduce the topic. There are rules on how the city manages property that's owned by the Parks and Recreation Department. Selling a park that is used as a park requires the approval of the citizens of this community. This property is owned by Parks and Rec. It is not used as a park. We need you to confirm that it's not being used as a park so it can be sold. I know that's something unusual and probably something you will never face again. I'm just going to let Director Fletcher come up here. You're welcome to use any of these photographs of the area if you would like, but I think you'll do it more justice than me.
Sure, thank you. Good evening, and thanks for your time and consideration. So just a little bit of a background on this piece of property. It was a gift accepted by the City Commission in May of 1976, donated by Woodbury Ransom. And at the time the land was donated and accepted, the Vine neighborhood was supportive, but did request that the Parks Department leave the property in its natural state. You can't really tell by this picture, but I can tell you it is in its natural state. It is kind of on a sloped side hill, and as you know, probably can tell from the map, it's very close to Davis Street Park, which just went through a pretty nice facelift. If you are a skater, you know, or have skaters in your family, you know we have an awesome skate plaza there now. We would not develop this piece of land as a park because it is so adjacent to Davis Street. And then the topography doesn't really lend itself to developing it as a park property. If we were to go through the process to sell this piece of property through the city's process at fair market value, I would request that the proceeds be earmarked to maintain and or improve Davis Street Park so that we keep those dollars in that neighborhood. And if we can add something to Davis Street, or if we can use it to maintain, if we're allowed to do that. And I did want to let you know that I did meet with the Vine Executive Board on August 14th, and they will talk about it at their board meeting. I think it is either today or tomorrow, and would make a recommendation in support, I would assume, of selling it. I think there was a desire by some of the folks in the room to see it back on the tax rolls perhaps, and you know, a positive use of that piece of property.
We did receive support from the director of the Vine Neighborhood Association.
Correct.
Who contacted us in support of this, recognizing that Davis Street Park is right down the street and serves this area.
Does anyone have any questions for Director Fletcher?
Was this noticed at all to the other, it sounds like there was support from the Vine Street Neighborhood Association president, but what about the surrounding neighbors?
Have not spoken to them.
This does not require, this is not a public hearing. Right. It doesn't require notice. At least one direct neighbor is aware of it, and I would guess that the neighbors on both sides are. We've spoken with one for sure, so we know for sure that they are aware. But this does not require a notice. You know, what's before you tonight is to determine whether or not its current use is a park. It's kind of, again, it's kind of an unusual request for you.
Regarding the request of earmarking any of the funds, I realize that may not be in our purview here, but is there a communique that we can send along with this vote to affirm that, or is that something that the Parks Department should address through a letter?
So it is in the minutes that Director Fletcher stated how the funds from the sale, if it is sold, would be used. You can certainly put in your comments, which it sounds like you're doing, that would be very important to you. But in terms of a condition to you confirming it is not a park, do you have something? I'm waiting for you to answer. I mean, could they put that condition on there? Would we want them to put that condition on there?
It's really not in your purview. It's more a request from the administration to the city commission.
Right. So, that's been communicated.
Yeah, and I would make sure that our actually current CFO, who is our city manager, is aware of. And I did have communication with our former CFO about that particular issue, and he didn't think that there was going to be an issue with that.
I have a question. Are there any living relatives of the original donors of the space, and will they be offended if this space changes?
Not aware. Back in 1976, I couldn't tell you how old Mr. Ransom was, but I'm guessing he's probably passed, but that's a good question.
Is that something that can be researched prior to?
Yeah, we can look into that for sure.
I'm sorry, but could it be explained a little bit more, I guess, with regards to the current state of the square there, and was this initiated by, somebody that's interested in purchasing it? Was it initiated by the city? Kind of how did this come about, and what's the current state now?
Well, I was approached probably over 2 years ago. I didn't even know we owned it until somebody came to me and said, hey, is there any interest in selling that lot? And at the time, I was quite busy with other things and just didn't really give it that much attention. And there is a person that's interested in the property, and I've been working with our city attorney to make sure we go through the proper steps if we can get it to that point to where it is put on the market and we can accept a fair market value offer. So I guess to your point, I guess I don't know. That's all I can say, really.
I'm curious as to the process. Maybe I missed it. Forgive me if I did. When this gets unparked and reverts back, is that what happens to zoning? Does that automatically default to the adjacent zoning, or is it unzoned at that point?
Currently zoned residential.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if the park had a separate.
We don't have a current district for parks. We don't currently have a zoning classification that designates just open space.
Okay,
open parks are allowed in every zoning district, so it's zoned.
So that'd be RS4 then.
It is zoned RM15.
RM15. Okay.
So based on your comment earlier, the city's not. There's no expenditure of funds. Currently, there's no lawn mowing or really anything being done there.
There's nothing happening there right now.
Cool. Any other questions?
I have a comment, I guess. I don't know. I know it came before as kind of almost a no-brainer, but I have some reservations about it, to be honest. I think back when I was a kid, my fondest memories of being a young boy was playing at the swamp a block away. And that's where we went down and we built forts and we, caught crayfish, and that's, if I think of my life before 12, it was in the swamp. And I now live on, just basically just south of the Crane Park Woods, and my boys are already out in those woods. It's completely undeveloped. There's no, it's woods, and that's where you go out and you build a fort and you run around, you around, and, you know, I don't live in this neighborhood, and I guess I would want to know from the neighbors, is this a valuable asset to you guys? Do you see this as a bit of green space that's of value, or is this kind of a nuisance, you know, piece of property? You know, if it's a nuisance, yeah, absolutely. You know, if it's just a place for vagrants to hang out or whatnot, it makes sense. But if it's simply a financial type situation, I can't imagine the fair market value is very high. We're going to be losing you know, the neighborhood would be losing, you know, potentially an asset that some folks in that neighborhood may enjoy. So I guess I guess my inclination after kind of thinking about this a little bit is that I think I'd want to hear from some of those neighbors, you know, even though it's not required.
Right. So the adjacent owner is the person who would like to purchase it. The resident who lives adjacent to it. I don't know the answer to that, but they have requested the purchase of it. You know what, and as I said before, a piece of property that's owned and improved as a park is a public asset and requires citizens' approval. You know, it could only be sold by the vote of the public. This is owned by the city. It happens to be owned by Parks and Rec. We have property owned by various departments, but it is not currently improved or used as a park, nor is it designated as a park in the city's master plan.
But if any one of us wanted to go over and feed the birds, we'd have every right to go do that tomorrow afternoon.
I don't know that's necessarily the case. It's not, I mean, just because it's owned by the city doesn't mean that it is for public use. It's owned by a government entity. And I think that's a pretty clear distinction. You know, it's not improved to be used by the public like a park would be. And I think, you know, in thinking about, I appreciate where you're coming from, but in thinking about the master plan, one of our big things for the parks, you know, for parks was having access to have everybody a park within 5 minutes. There's a park right down the street that serves this 5-minute radius. So that's why it was also not designated in the master plan as needing to be a park, because a gap wasn't needing to be filled. And so when this request filtered up from the Parks and Rec Department to the Plan Commission, as the city attorney recommended, to one, confirm that it's not a city park, and that it's considered a park in the master plan, you know, we felt comfortable with going through that process because for staff's perspective, it meets those two issues.
So I totally appreciate where you're going, but the way I think about it, it's like Kleinstock, which isn't too far away from here either. One of the first things on the rules, and there's rules, is stay on the trail. Why does it say that? Because when your kids are running off in the woods in areas that look just like this and they trip over a log and they split their head open and you sue them, they say, were you on the trail? No. Rule number 1, stay on the trail. And so, I mean, they know you're going to run around the woods. They know you're going to have fun. But they can point to that rule and CYA themselves when you fall into a situation like this. There's no trail. There's no nothing. And so when you're running around back there and you trip and fall and crack your head open, there's a lot of liability involved, and that's what concerns me.
I think if it sounds as if, and I could be off base on this because I've learned of this just a week ago or so, and hadn't really thought this much of it, frankly. It sounds like this question's been brought up from a resident, or uninterested buyer. So I'm wondering what is there a sense of urgency here? If we've owned this since the 70s, if the city's owned this since the 70s, why not put it out to the community and ask, hey, do you want a zig-zag here? Do you want this as a park, or do you want this as a developed, or I guess I'm kind of hesitant to just say, yes, let's go ahead and sell it, because somebody asked, I suppose.
So a couple things. We have a ton of priorities that would be way in front of doing anything at this location. One, because of the topography. Two, because of its location next to an existing park. We have deficit areas where we don't have a park in a neighborhood, for example, that, I mean, this would be so far down the list that we wouldn't certainly get to it during my tenure, I guarantee you that. And then to your point about, you know, let's say it was $30,000 or $40,000. Our entire budget is $2.1 million annually. $30,000 goes a long way for us, whether it be maintenance or the purchase of new equipment or enhancing a park like a Davis Street Park. So, and I don't know what the fair market value is or what we would get for that property, but I can tell you it would go a long way, as we don't have a huge budget.
I would just say it sounds like it's an unneeded property, hasn't been utilized, and it fits one of my criteria, which is to put property back on the tax rolls. So it's an opportunity for somebody in the neighborhood who wants it to develop it. It sounds like a win-win for the city and the neighborhood. And I'm sure you might have some people in the neighborhood who may like it and not like the idea, et cetera, but in general, in the balance of things, I think for the benefit of the city, I think it's a great thing to do.
If I may, and I'm probably the catalyst to some of the discussion this evening. First off, in regard to the deed, there are no deed restrictions on it, so we don't have to worry about members of the donor's family. There were no restrictions. There was an outright gift to the city. So we own it in fee, and to that end, the city owns it, not the Parks and Recreation Department manage it. There's other properties that are managed by the Public Services Department, but the property is titled to the city of Kalamazoo. So to that end, it was a gift, outright gift, and other than the request by the Vine neighborhood that it be left in its natural state. I can tell you that in 1976, I think that what is now the Davis Street Park may still have been the driving training site for Central High School, because I trained to drive at that site. So to that end, this property kind of fell into the city's lap. Under state law, a city is prohibited from selling park property without a vote of the people, unless there is any park is not required under the official master plan of the city. Again, I don't know that this is not identified as a park under the master plan, but to the end that it is maintained as a natural area, it was my advice that so as to remove any doubt, and if the city chooses to sell this, somebody says, hey, that's a natural state, it really, even though you haven't designated it as a park, you should treat it like a park, and that requires a vote of the city electorate before you can sell it. So as to avoid that problem, it was my advice, let's take this to the Planning Commission, get an affirmation that this is not a park, that it's not necessary under the master plan, and therefore that would free up the city so as to be able to sell it. And under, again, state law, we have to get the fair market value from it. So we will sell it for what it's worth. Our assessing office has already kind of done a kind of a back of the envelope view of what that property is worth, given the fact that it could be developed for residential in that neighborhood. Despite some of the topographical challenges, there are homes right across the street that have the same typographical challenge, because they're right on a hill, that have existed for probably at least 100 years or nearly so. So it is available and could be sold. So it was my advice, come to the Planning Commission and get that, if you will, affirmation that this is not a park, it's not necessary as a park parcel, and therefore it frees up the city so as to be able to sell it. That's the only reason that we're here before you is I said, let's kind of use the belt and suspenders approach and get that affirmation so that we eliminate any question that should come up in the future in attempting to sell this. Because absent that, I mean, I could have said, let's take a risk, and I could have told the rec director, if you got somebody who's willing to put cash on the barrelhead for the fair market value, sell it tomorrow, and we wouldn't even be here. But I didn't want to have that type of deal get stalled by somebody who says, oh no, that's a park, you can't sell it without a vote of the people. So it was a cautionary approach that I advised city administration to take in coming before you.
So it's your opinion that this process would remove any potential encumbrance and create a clear chain of title, which would maximize its value?
It wouldn't, the chain of title is clear, but what it does do is eliminate a challenge that somebody says, even though it's not designated as a park, you're treating it as a natural preserve area, and therefore you need the vote of the people. And to that end, Ms. Anderson was correct. We have all kinds of property that the city owns, and there are parcels that are not open to the public. There are parcels that we freely make open to the public, and natural areas such as this that, while people could probably go there and do, who knows, whether you're a preteen kid exploring the woods or you're an older teenager trying to catch a smoke, or adult people doing other recreational activity in the woods. That it doesn't necessarily mean we're opening it to the public for use.
To Commissioner Wisner's earlier point, we do have a couple members of the public here. This is not a public hearing, but perhaps folks have suggested staying or have decided to stay. So if there's anyone in the public that would like to comment,
if she's excused herself, she can't participate in the discussion.
But, all right, well, if no one wants to speak, any other questions for staff? Well then, can we have a motion on the agenda item confirming that the request is to confirm 925 Grant Street is not a city park and is not considered a park under the city's 2025 master plan?
I'd make that motion.
Okay, so a yay vote is affirming those statements that it's not a city park. Is that?
No, I would make the motion, but I would be voting against it.
Okay, but you're making a motion.
Sure.
Okay, yep, all right, so we have that motion. Do we have a second?
I second that, and that's the motion to affirm that the parcel is not a city park or identified as a park in the master plan.
Right.
As per PC 2018-14. Okay.
Right.
As seconded.
All right.
It just, I probably would vote in favor of this. I would just really like to see it presented to the surrounding neighbors and having a more formal comment session, I suppose, or a way of for the surrounding neighbors to solicit some feedback before voting yes on it. With the existing, the way it was donated to the city, with the way it was supposed to be kept natural in perpetuity, with regards to this being initiated by a private buyer as opposed to by the city's need. I just feel like we really kind of owe it to the neighborhood to hear them out and see what they would like versus us just kind of reacting. It feels a little knee-jerk to me, so I'd be voting no.
Any other discussion on the motion?
I'm in agreement with Commissioner Wisner. I think it's a good idea, but probably merits some neighborly responses.
Any other?
I also have a sense of that, but I think that given that it's something that hasn't been used and it doesn't really serve a purpose on the tax, on the non-tax rolls right now, I think it's great that there's interest locally and that it can get developed within that context. So I'm going to vote yes.
I think use is being used is a subjective term. It may not be used, but may be looked at by hundreds of people a day in its natural state. And whether or not it gets changed, I think should be open for a little bit of kind of public comment.
Did you want to go?
Well, I had a comment. Well, is this something that we could table till our next meeting, or is this something
We
that we have
could
to
table
vote
it. You would have to withdraw the motion, if I am correct. If they wanted to table it.
Well, it's not a table. The proper parliamentary procedure is postponed till a time certain.
Right.
So you'd move to postpone until the next meeting.
And I guess if doing that, I would ask what information the commissioners want in order to confirm that it is not a park and not a park under the master plan. I mean, because you have at least one of those pieces already in your packet. So if there is additional information that staff needs to provide to you to confirm that it's not a city park, I think it would be helpful for us to understand what that is.
I think a letter, a formal letter from the neighborhood association would go a long way. You mentioned that they were in support of it, but I think if they were here to support it verbally, or even a letter would help. Letters to the neighbors would certainly help. I mean, just absent any of that, it just feels like we're doing this with the knee-jerk.
I would ask the city planner, I'm sorry, Christine, if we were to pull this back and say the neighbors wanted it to be a park, we've already been told there are no resources to do that. We would not be able to develop it. And we'd only be opening up the city to liability at this point further if people start to engage in it act as a park. So you'd have to properly notice the property to be restricted, as no trespassing. I just don't, personally, I just think that I understand your concerns. I think that we should just go ahead and move ahead on the vote and move it off so it can get sold. And there's a lot of other parks and properties in the city that need the resources, that need that, and some locally within that area. And I think we would just be depleting resources that could be used more effectively in other parks.
So I guess to answer, I think you asked me a question at the beginning of that. So, in terms of it, I think we can confirm what Director Fletcher said, is that it's not on any priority list to become a park. They're currently writing their parks master plan. It has not come up in any of the public meetings that they have had that it needs to be a park, and that it was desired to be a park by residents. So they've been doing public meetings for the last 6 months, and at least the research that I have, the input that I have seen does not, there's been no input that this needs to be a park. We received an email from the head of the Vine Neighborhood Association saying that he's in support of this. I'm sorry I did not put it in your packets because it's not a public hearing. I did not, because I didn't believe it to be perfectly germane, as I'll use the word of the night, to whether or not it was a park.
If I may, I appreciate the concern that's been expressed, but the whole point of this matter coming before the Planning Commission was basically a formality. Under the master plan, under Imagine Kalamazoo 2025, as Christine said, nobody from the neighborhood was advocating that this parcel be somehow made into a park or reserved for park use. It was really the scope was improve the Davis Street Park that already existed in the next block. And as I said, this was basically a formality to affirm what we already know. The parcel is not used as a park. It is not considered a park under the master plan. And to get an official statement to that effect by this body, because you guys are the ones that approved the master plan, was, I thought, an important step so as to prevent anybody from somehow tripping the city up and attempting to sell this property. So it's more a formality than anything else. That's why there was no need for a public hearing. That's not why the neighbors weren't informed or given notice, because as I indicated, but for taking this step so as to make sure that somebody can't trip us up in the future, we could have sold this a week ago without the need for any kind of hearing before this body. But I felt it was important to get something on the record so as to make sure that in the event of a sale, that sale couldn't be undone, or at least a cloud created over that sale.
Any other comments? I have concerns about the liability, and I see this as an opportunity to bring some income into the community, and I would hope you don't stick with $30,000. You could build 6 houses on that lot, so there's a lot of opportunity there. So with that, can we have a roll call vote, please? Is this a roll call? I would do roll call regardless.
Bartman?
Yes.
Koss?
Yes.
Freeman Wright is abstaining. Milliken?
Yes.
Pitts? Bias?
No.
Wissner?
No.
All right. Thank you very much. Moving on now to citizen comments. Are there any citizen comments? No? All right. City Commissioner liaison comments.
I'm Jack Urban. Did I have to say who I am?
We've seen you.
Yeah, you need to know who I am. I attended the meeting at the Edison Neighborhood Association about the proposed development on Belford Street. And it's true that the notice is short, but for anything that's new, there's a time at which no one knew about it before. I'm guessing that why things are moving along so rapidly on this now is that there's a MSHDA or a state requirement that they have to have some things in time. That's why we have this special meeting. Okay, so so far, I think the concerns that have been raised on this have been taken seriously. I don't see anybody laughing at anybody about this. I think the degree of participation we're getting from the public in things has definitely improved since I've become a city commissioner. The fact that people came to that meeting and came to this one, still engaged, many of them still saying they want to know more. Since you made it clear that you're acting only in the scope of a rezoning request, you're on good grounds. But I hope you continue to have public input on when you do the site plan review. Just in background, I've lived near that site since 1970, and I recall when Bryant Mill was operating, and it was a junk plant then. They used to put Band-Aids on the pipes to keep them from leaking. They just steel strapped around with a piece of rubber and call it good. And then they quit operating it, and the place where this is going to be built was where the power plant was. So there is fly ash on the site, probably not exactly where the parking lot is, but in the area. Most of that got moved to the other side of the creek. The hazard from fly ash is basically from heavy metals. So if people eat the soil or drill a well, a shallow well in that site, they're gonna probably get some of it. But if they don't dig up the soil and eat it, or eat the worms that are living in there, or drink the water, they're probably gonna be okay. But it's this, the heavily contaminated area is on the other side, and that right now is open, and there's no plan to pave it. So that is a risky, far riskier situation than on the east side of the creek. So I await the chance to vote to take this up at the City Commission, and thank you for going ahead with it and getting this far with it.
Thank you. City planner report.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. You have in your packet the site plans. We have been very busy with site plan approvals or site plan review. This summer, nothing has slowed up. Tomorrow alone, we have 5 pre-application meetings for projects, so there's a lot going on. As Commissioner Urban noted, and as I noted during the public hearing, site plans do go out to the head of the neighborhood. So we are sharing projects as soon as those details come in and comments are taken. And will be done so for the project that you heard tonight. There's been a variety of site plans. I won't read them to you. If you have any questions about any of them, you are welcome to ask. But again, we are moving along, and we have a lot of good development going on in Kalamazoo, a lot of good projects.
Thank you.
I will say, sorry, I'm not done yet. Next meeting will be September 6th. It's the week of Labor Day. You have 2 cases that will be on the agenda. The first one is the vacation of Scudder Court. Scudder Court is a very narrow street that runs north-south that dead ends in front of the old Gibson guitar plant. It is not currently being used for anything. It is, the request is to vacate it. And so that will be coming to you. That has been noticed in the Gazette and will be noticed tomorrow with mailings. The other thing that is going to be coming to you is the proposed rezoning for the north side. The notices are going out tomorrow. I am holding a info session, which the notices talk about, where I'm going to sit at NACD for about 3 hours next Wednesday night and just be present if anyone wants to come and ask questions about what the proposed zoning, how it impacts their property.
Then 7 p.m.
When?
6.
Next week? I think I'm there from 4 to 7.
Oh, 4 to 7.
Yeah. That I will be there. The rezoning was discussed many times at the neighborhood plan meetings, so we did not do an additional come-all meeting. The public meeting will be handled by the Plan Commission, and so we'll have comments then. Earlier that week on the 4th, Tuesday the 4th, City Commission meets on the 4th that week because of Labor Day. The Northside Neighborhood Plan is going in front of the City Commission, as is the public hearing for the Northside Cultural Business District Authority, which is a quarter improvement authority district in the north side, so directly north of downtown. And so next week, I feel like that first week of September is all things north side. We've got lots of good projects going on, both in front of the City Commission and in front of the Plan Commission. If you have questions regarding the zoning, we'll try and get your packets out a little early for you, so you can get that information and see it. I'm happy to just, if you want information, just let me know.
Next week you'll be at NACD on Wednesday, you said?
Yeah. And I'm just I'm not doing a public presentation. I'm just going to be present to answer any questions that residents may have as it relates to their property once they get the notice and the map and all of those details.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Any miscellaneous comments by planning commissioners?
Just that, yeah, I'm wondering, well, might not be a good idea, but the site plan meetings that take place, I don't know how well they're attended by any of us. I know we all don't have time, but maybe we come up with a system that in a particular week or month, certain people might want to drop in, volunteer to drop in that week.
Emily's attended a couple.
Rotation.
Greg has attended a couple as an observer. Anyone is welcome to come. We are, if there are more than 3 of you, am I correct, Clyde? At one place at a time, we have to notice it. So
well, there's more than, no, this majorities. We've got.
Oh, okay, right. So, but we do want to control, we don't want everybody to pop in.
Right.
So, but however you guys would like to handle it, you're welcome to. You always receive a copy of it and know that you can always ask questions on any of the plans that come forward, whether you can attend the meeting or not. And like Emily, in the case of the one tonight, you know, if there are, if you wanted to make sure that the stormwater issues were brought to the forefront, you're welcome to send that comment if you can't come in advance. Know that site plan committee is made up of all sorts of folks from public services, utilities, stormwater, wastewater, but also environmental, kind of our environmental services wing of public services is in attendance, in addition to planning, building trades, and traffic.
Yeah, I should ask you this earlier, but within that, the floodplain issue, how involved is the Corps in providing a solution, or is there any discussion?
That is a much bigger topic.
I understand
Yeah.
that, but I was just wondering if there's gears are moving on that or not.
Yes,
the Corps of
gears are
Engineers.
moving to study the floodplain, yeah.
Well, I meant
Yes.
find a solution.
Yes,
I'm sure they're
that too.
studying it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other comments? Well, it was a long meeting, but I was very impressed. We tackled some tough issues. Everyone was engaged. Thank you for that. I do not like being chair. I was struggling with this outline and trying to be engaged, so kudos to Rachel. I welcome her back. But I'm not, okay, you want to do a motion? Motion to adjourn, second, good. Thank you.